A couple of months ago, I made a video on a very divisive game called The Coffin of Andy and Leyley. I spoke about my thoughts on the game as a whole, and I went into the initial controversy that would become the main thing the game was known about. And I'm purposely not saying what that is because YouTube would chuck me out of a window. The video ended up getting seen by way more people than I ever thought, which led to a very diverse set of opinions in the comment section. It was a lot, and worst of all, my video was immediately made outdated in just a week because the game got a new chapter. That's no exaggeration, by the way. I was absolutely livid. So instead of instantly capitalizing and making another video on this, I worked on a bunch of other projects instead. God, the Deltarune video was so good, guys. Anyhow, I knew I'd eventually get around to talking about chapter 3 of this game because I just hate leaving stories unfinished. So here we are. You're probably filled with questions like, Ty, did the game improve? Or Ty, did the game get worse? Or Ty, this is the IRS, why haven't you paid your taxes? All of these questions will be answered right now. Kinda, no, and you will never see even a penny from me, you greedy little fuck. You know, it really sucks when I'm looking up stuff for videos, and since everything is blocks now, I can't find anything. I love living in the UK where I have to give my ID for everything. Thank God for PIA VPN, am I right, guys? With this VPN, all of these websites suddenly don't want my ID anymore. So basically how it should be. But I can also now fully utilize 100% of my Netflix account, so I can watch all of these anime that aren't available in my country. You get end-to-end encryption, which is topical for no reason at all. You have the fastest speeds offered by a VPN, and you also get to use it with unlimited devices. So check it out now. Seriously, if you live in the UK, it's basically required unless you want to be big brothered. If you use my link in the description, then check out PIA VPN. For real, it's my VPN of choice. Anyway, back to the video. After Andrew and Ashley sacrifice their parents' soul to the devil, kill and eat them, we get sent to a flashback of the duo meeting their grandparents, and also a closer look at how awful their parents really are. More on that later. Anyway, there was a devil's ritual in a basement that Andrew goes down, and that's the only thing worth noting. I'm serious. In the present, their avoidance of their crimes leads them into a gas station. Hijinks ensue. I'm still bad at puzzles. They kill a group of campers or something, and I know my summary might sound uncaring. Don't worry, they don't have names or sprites, so I'm only matching the game's energy. Ashley is Ashley though, so she makes things worse, and Andrew finally has enough of her shit and attempts to kill her. But because of literal divine intervention, Andrew gets his soul removed and then put back, under the condition that Ashley will properly work for the demons she met in chapter 1. Andrew properly breaks up with his ex, abuses Ashley, a thing that happens that I actually feel kind of gross talking about, and the two decide to game end because they rightfully realize their lives were fucked. I don't care what anyone says. This is the good ending of the game. This would be where I'd segue into talking about the things I liked and then yap about the things that I didn't. But I also feel like I need to clarify that my opinions on the game is less of a depiction issue, like I thought it was in the first game, and more of a foundational problem that exists in every chapter of the game so far. The music is still good. The game has a sound that is recognizable. The use of toy box, I read that as Toby Fox, oh my god. The use of toy box sounds playing into the two siblings' stunted development is a good touch. However, the songs do get a bit repetitive when you're stuck in the same area for too long, which happened to me a lot. I'll chalk it up to a skill issue though, because I feel like the puzzles were harder in this one, which is a good thing. In chapter 1 and 2, I feel like the puzzles were too easy for the majority of the game. In chapter 3, I actually had to use my brain. Saying I enjoyed them overall though is a false nuke. A lot of these puzzles seem kind of pointless, or like you're expected to just spam buttons until you get lucky. The family portrait comes to mind because I would not associate any of these faces to these characters outside of the father. A lot of these puzzles require you to go back and forth between rooms just to get it done, which feels like a waste of time. And there are multiple points where you have to be on a certain tile to progress the game, and there is no indication of where that is. The game's background and foreground blend together way too hard. There's a part of the game where I'm supposed to find shoes on the floor, and I actually couldn't see one of them. Or a time with this tree where you can just walk up onto what definitely looks like part of the background. But if I wanted to go left or right on the same tree, I can't do that. I would normally be fine to say I was being blind as fuck, but this is a persistent issue in the whole game. In this room, there is a puzzle that requires you to enter a code based on the order of these leaves. You'll notice each tree contains a different amount of leaves. So you would assume that you could count up the numbers of leaves on each tree and then progress in the game. You see, that would mean I was paying attention to my surroundings, so what you're actually expected to do is walk around aimlessly until this fucking eye pops up and tells you there's a secret code under the tree. What? How does one accidentally design a good puzzle, but force me into a much simpler and boring one? That's incredible. Now that I've had the time to think about my experience with the game, I don't think this loop is really for me. It's far too understimulating. Peep that thing I did there. I did this thing where I talk about my feelings towards something. I think people call it an opinion? You know, the whole idea that something is subjective and up to the person talking about the thing. Don't know why I brought that up here. Anyway, I think the writing of the game sucks. This is definitely a me thing, but I have never been a fan of media where the characters we follow are shitty and the rest of the world is shitty too, because I just don't find it interesting. This quickly went from disinterest to mild annoyance with this game, as our main characters are clearly supposed to be seen as bad people. There's an asterisk at the end of that sentence. The narrator and every character that exists makes that very clear. Every chapter has someone channel their inner low-tier god when dealing with the siblings. It's not subtle. But then every other major character or group of people are kind of shitty too. For what feels like 40% of interactions with police, they are shockingly incompetent. To find out more, such 40% cops, Andrew confesses to his murders and they literally go, well, it says you're dead, so this is just a prank call, and then hang up. And they weren't even brought up during the apartment situation from chapter 1. You know, when everyone was being held there with no food and anyone who came near them would be shot on sight? Yeah, the news covered it and said the same thing and acted like it wasn't a big deal. So the government and the media are all corrupt enough to let all of that happen without a second thought. Every character in the game is the same way too. Throwing around exploitatives left, right, and center. Overall, they're just shitty. And then there's the cultists, who I feel like I don't need to explain why they're bad. So when everyone's bad, they don't seem all that unique, despite the game constantly trying to show you that they are, by having a literal demon show interest in them specifically. I feel like it dilutes the obviously bad stuff the siblings do when everyone around them are pieces of shit too. There are moments in the game where the intended reaction is, oh my god, I can't believe they're doing this. But the only reactions I ever had were apathy or excitement at the thought of Andrew actually pulling the trigger and finally ending this game. The tone is also really weird. The first 2 chapters made jokes about a lot of serious themes present, but chapter 3 treats them with the gravity they deserve. However, the way those themes are actually portrayed are pretty shallow, which breaks my immersion anyway. For example, abuse and its many forms and how it trickles down to the next generation. The siblings go to see their grandparents, but we're only with these dudes for like 5 minutes. So the grandfather needs to be cartoonishly evil to compensate, or their mother, who feels like an entirely different character. In chapter 2, I would say the mother was neglectful to her kids. She worked a lot and put pressure on Andrew to look after his little sister. That alone would explain their dynamic. But it's a lot harder to justify killing them when those are her only traits. So now she is super abusive and was actually gonna rat her kids out if you watch this super secret YouTube video. I don't like the way their parents are depicted, even in the last chapter. People brought this up in my Discord server too, and they were really nice about it. But I am personally not a fan of the sibling's mother being as bad as she is in the game. Her being overworked and neglectful because of that put the two in the exact same place. So I can't help but think that other traits she has were added on retroactively to justify killing her in chapter 2. Like, most of her glaring examples of abuse either happen after the chapter she dies or on a fucking YouTube video. The worst thing she had done as far as chapter 2 is concerned is fake her kids' deaths, which I think was a bad decision because the impact of her death is lessened dramatically. I think the siblings having no real justifiable reason to kill their parents would have hit me a lot harder, and also expanded upon the fact that they are slowly isolating themselves from everyone they knew before the apartment incident. In its current form, their parents' murder acts as a consequence of their parenting that we don't really see until after they die, and I don't know. I think that's kind of lame when the other version would have been far more dramatic. For me, by the way. This is a personal thing. The way I see it, if the game wants to make the point that these two are irredeemable, then they should really rinse that aspect for all it's worth. Imagine if the mother was scared of the kids and knew about the murders, and the siblings coming back in chapter 2 to kill them was legitimately for an unjustifiable reason. Again, this is all subjective, but I prefer my characters in fiction to be messy and be allowed to do so without needing a reason that low-key minimizes what they did. Breaking Bad is one of the greatest pieces of television we have ever gotten. Its history on this channel has been comparing it to the incest game twice. I'm going to hell. Anyway, Breaking Bad has two main characters that do a lot of awful things, but in their minds believe they're justified. The reason I love this in that show is because the plot makes it abundantly clear that many of Walt and Jesse's choices were objectively bad, entirely avoidable, but more importantly, their choices. For example, there's a scene in season 5 where a character literally points out Walt's multiple errors throughout the series.
We had a good thing, you stupid son of a bitch. We had Fring. We had a lab. We had everything we needed. It all ran like clockwork. It was perfect. But no, you just had to blow it up. You and your pride and your ego. You just had to be the man. If you'd done your job, known your place, we'd all be fine right now.
And Walt, unable to come up with a legitimate retort, just fucking shoots him. Jesse tries to sell recovering addicts fucking meth for literally no reason.
So no matter what I do, hooray for me because I'm a great guy. It's all good. No matter how many dogs I kill, I just do an inventory and accept.
I know you're in pain.
No, you know what? Why I'm here in the first place is to sell you meth. You're nothing to me but customers.
There is no good justification for these actions. I cannot find a similar moment in the Coffin of Andy and Leyley. And that's so weird to me because this game practically beats you over the head with a bat telling you that these two are awful. And I think it's because a lot of the times, Andrew and Ashley aren't really given the ability to make choices that a good person wouldn't have made. Even going back to chapter 1, when they were locked in a room with no food and were legitimately going to die of starvation, they eat their neighbor. And this should be a major moment, right? Except, I feel like anyone in that situation would do this. Good or bad. I mean, a similar thing happened in real life. This is less of a choice they make and more of an action they were forced to do, which removes their agency. In Breaking Bad, there is a really noticeable scene in season 2? Yeah, season 2, yeah, where Walter lets someone choke to death. Not too different from something in the Coffin of Andy and Leyley, if you only look at the scene in a vacuum. But let's take a look at the wider context. Walter White has a pretty adequate life. He had a son, a wife, and a new child on the way. However, he was diagnosed with cancer around his 50th birthday, and driven by the want to provide for his family after death, he gets into drug dealing. This is understandable. The rest of the series makes sure you understand how quickly this stops being reasonable. He is given multiple outs that would allow him to stop dealing drugs, but chooses not to. That girl he let die? Well, Walt owed his drug partner, Jesse, $600,000 and refused to pay him because of a reason that's not important, I don't remember. Anyhow, Jane has an issue with this, obviously, and threatens to expose Walt to the police if he doesn't give Jesse what he owes. They plan on heading to New Zealand to start a drug-free life, but choose to do one last trip beforehand. Walt breaks into Jesse's house and sees Jane ODing, and chooses to do nothing. Like, sure, she threatened him, but only because he didn't give up what he owed, and his response was to let her die and lie about it the episode after. This lets you know that Walt is an evil little shit, and the reason that hits so hard is because it was entirely his choice. He wasn't pushed to this point in a moment of desperation, but because he had a personal grudge against a person. God, there are so many examples of this in Breaking Bad, or its prequel, Better Call Saul. In that show, everyone's situations are on them. They make choices that put them in holes that they have to make choices to get out of those holes. In the Coffin of Andy and Leyley, it's mostly the opposite. They're put between a rock and a hard place and then do the irredeemable acts afterwards, like eating their neighbor or their mother and father. If the Jane scene was written by the Coffin of Andy and Leyley writers, it would be Jane holding Walt at gunpoint and making it an us versus them situation. And hey, I know Breaking Bad had a similar situation with Gus. There was no way Walt could live with Gus still being around. But that situation only came about because of Walt's actions again. He made his money and decided he wanted more and began working with Gus, who did not play by Walter or Jesse's rules, which caused conflict. The formula is super simple. Character does choice. A reaction happens. A series starting with bad people being reactive is just a lot harder to really make compelling in my opinion, especially when the game is supremely confused on whether Andy and Leyley are supposed to be bad people. Do you want to give me something to brag about on dates I don't go on? If you subscribe, you can help. Follow my socials, fund the boy Failure. You get access to the Patreon-only Discord server and a bunch of other perks that are listed right here. Anyway, thanks for listening. Back to the video. Normally this would be the section where I say the writer wrote the thing but doesn't understand why it works, but that wouldn't be true here. I think the writer behind this game is very aware of what they're doing. So trying to write out my issues left me stuck for a super long time. Everything that happens in this game feels like a logical step forward for the most part. Like me explaining everything at the start, it made sense. When I played the games back to back, I got the feeling that the writer wanted their cake and to eat it too. Andrew and Ashley are bad. I feel like I've said this like a million fucking times, Jesus. These two suck. I thought the games wanted to convey the message that they were kind of just born that way. Sure, their situation wasn't ideal, but it wouldn't typically cause someone to turn out the way the siblings did. With how I play chapter 1 and 2, I was under the belief that the two siblings, or at least Ashley, were born evil. Chapter 3 has done heavy lifting in trying to make you sympathize with Andrew and Ashley, and that doesn't sit right with me. I'm not a fan of a character getting a backstory after death, or shit hits the fan too hard. If a character is barely developed and then suddenly dies and then gets his backstory, I'm gonna just roll my eyes. It is legitimately the most annoying trope in writing. Jujutsu Kaisen is a huge culprit of this, with one of its main characters, Nobara. Spoilers for the biggest anime of the modern era? Anyhow, JJK was praised heavily for not falling down the same pitfalls as its older contemporaries, which included bullshit plot armor, a constant need to introduce new villains that raise the power ceiling, and misogyny. I'm really sorry if this is how you found out that a bunch of your favorite animes aren't really the best at representation. Anyhow, before I get hung up for pointing out all of those issues, another consequence of my listed issues with anime is the core cast of characters who we started the series with getting totally power crept and kind of forgotten. I don't have to use Naruto as an example for this one, thankfully, since Dragon Ball is arguably even worse. In the 40-something years of that manga being in serialization, we've been introduced to a lot of really cool people with really unique gimmicks or character traits, and now they're gone. With a constant need to raise the stakes, the human characters in that series just couldn't keep up anymore and appeared less and less. And that really blows because you are usually given a lot of time to understand these characters beforehand. So watching them get phased out leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. Anyhow, long explanation of why anime secretly sucks is over. JJK was praised for not doing that, especially with its main female lead, Nobara. In season 1, the three main characters were all given a reasonable amount of time to develop, and it was really good. A female character in anime was not made into a useless damsel in distress. This is a big deal. Please clap. But for whatever reason, all of those careful choices made to avoid those holes totally flew out the window when season 2 came out. Nobara doesn't really do anything that season. She has a fight with one dude that was admittedly pretty alright, and then she dies. Yeah, that's it. Before actually seeing her off though, we get her entire backstory for why she was even in Tokyo. And you know, it's sad at all, but surely it would have worked better if we got her backstory I don't know, earlier? A character is introduced in that backstory as being so important to Nobara, and then it cuts to her in present day questioning how Nobara is doing now. Like, who are you? It's hard for me to feel anything other than dissatisfaction when something like that happens, as I feel like the character stopped being a person alive in the story and just became someone made to fulfill a goal, like making the audience sad, or in the Coffin of Andy and Leyley's case, sympathetic. I know me going on this long rant is going to make people think I hate anime, but I don't. I actually really like anime, like JoJo's. I have a JoJo's video I'm going to post on Patreon in a few weeks, actually, if you care to see that. Before chapter 3, I was under the impression that Andrew and Ashley were major pieces of shit. But actually, I should feel bad for them because everyone in their past were terrible people, and we only find out after their parents are dead. It's like the writer didn't want the audience to focus too much on the fact that the siblings murdered their parents and gave a here nigga damn explanation. I legitimately believe that to be the case, since that flashback at the start had almost nothing to do with anything else that happens in the game. I may have said it earlier, but the mother from chapter 2 to 3 is such a jarring flip. In chapter 2, she was kinda normal. The most stern she really gets is in telling Andrew and Ashley not to sleep together, which reasonable, by the way. Then in chapter 3, she is Darman levels of unsubtle about what she's supposed to be. Oh man, I think she's an abusive parent, guys. Where was this when she was alive? My reaction to their mother's true nature was not, oh wow, everyone failed Andrew and Ashley. It was, are we sure this is the same character? I mean, she's in the shadows, so can we be sure? In all seriousness though, if I can see the writing change so drastically between chapters, I will not give a fuck about what I'm seeing. I feel like everyone's portrayals has done a major 180. No, that wouldn't really emphasize how major of a shift chapter 3 was. I feel like everyone's portrayal has done a major— oh my god, they're driving off a cliff! From what I understood, Ashley was the main cause for a lot of evil stuff that happens in this game, with Andrew both feeling responsible for her and also being forced along into her schemes by years of mental abuse, turning him into a doormat. In chapter 3, I genuinely feel like I've entered a fucking bizarro world. Ashley is given a bunch of sympathetic traits here to make you feel bad for her, and it just doesn't work for me, dude. For example, the prophecy she saw in chapter 2 where Andrew kills her. She was pretty gleeful about the whole thing, you know, I save, but now in chapter 3, she is terrified of pulling the trigger and would do anything to avoid that future, which is really weird. A moment of good writing I pointed out was Ashley guilt-tripping Andrew into being her accomplice for an accidental murder, playing up her feelings to get Andrew to feel bad for her, and snapping back to her usual coldness the second he makes the point that this isn't a good idea. The game now wants to tell me that those feelings were all real and that Ashley, I do the first thing that comes to mind without a care in the world, Graves was both smart enough to leverage those real feelings to get what she wants, but also emotionally stable enough to turn the waterworks off immediately when she was like 10 or some shit. And then the same thing happened to Andrew, but in reverse? He went from the reluctant accomplice to Mr. fucking abuse. And I don't buy this either. Sure, I can believe Andrew also has bad traits, but to this level? No way, dude. Again, in the first 2 chapters, Ashley attacks Andrew for no reason and he fights back. The seriousness coming from the fact that Ashley was not ready for this reaction. It was a rare moment where she wasn't in control. In chapter 3, he tries to kill her after Ashley trolls a bit too hard, fails, is locked into a room on a chain by Ashley, and then beats the shit out of her. This is also played seriously, as it should, but the game does something really fucking weird and kinda sides with Ashley. Look, I don't think there should be a side. They both suck. But to take one side feels wrong, especially with what we've seen Ashley do to Andrew, and also what we're going to see later on as well. The section is gonna have mentions of SA, assault, alcoholism, and abuse in general. So please skip to this time code if you would like to avoid that. I'm not a fan of the way shock horror is used in most cases. The sky is also blue. Come on, you know this about me. At this point, it's one of my defining character traits. Statistically, you've seen the Urban Spook video, so I'm not going to spend too long explaining why I think the use of this technique is wasted in most bits of media. But to be honest, techniques used to shock me have like a 50% chance of doing the complete opposite. And it comes down to why writers choose to do it. I feel like writers don't think they can build up to a shocking moment. Like, the moment itself is the only thing that matters, even if it makes absolutely no sense. If an audience member is shocked by that scene, then that's all the writer needs to worry about. When like, no, a shocking scene hits like a million times harder when you could see it coming. But a writer did such a good job in distracting you or planting the seeds for this moment to take place. Akira is really good at this. Some dudes capture a guy and you can see another guy messing with this grenade. A few minutes later and boom! You get that sudden jolt at the explosion, but then a major pit in your stomach realizing there's characters you know that could be hurt. This manga, whose name I can't pronounce because of a 2-year-old bit.
Don Don Don.
Yeah, Don Don Don.
It isn't.
He's literally spelled Don Don Don. Like, what is wrong with you?
Does this in a way I loved, personally. A character is cursed by this yokai. If she is outside after a certain time, she's basically just dead. So the manga spends a few chapters showing the reader how this cursed character will have to live until the curse is lifted. Except someone fucking dies because of a totally brand new and unrelated threat, which now becomes the cast's main priority. They manage to just barely send back this new threat after dozens of chapters of setup and fighting, and right when you think everything's over, you realize what time it is. I'm not gonna spoil what happens next, but I legitimately got chills reading that the first time. Anyway, why did I need to give off this super long explanation about shock horror in a chapter about your choices not mattering? Well, it's because this game has bad shock content, and as a casualty, the many choices you get to make don't really feel that impactful. Obviously, there aren't any good endings. You know, where the characters get redeemed or don't do really evil stuff, which is kind of its own issue. Because why do I get these choices in the first place if I'm still very limited in the direction I go in the game? But more importantly, I am still limited by the fact that this game will have these characters go down the path to hell, and there isn't any way for that to change. This game has an unknown amount of chapters left. And unfortunately, if you want to keep playing the game, your options are die or get railroaded into weird and poorly written incest shit. Yeah! You know how I spent a decent amount of time saying the game probably wasn't a fetish thing, just a weirdly handled edgy element in the game? I don't have stills anymore, but my arms are crossed. Even if you do what I did and avoid it like the plague, this game is making you go down that route. The end of my gameplay has Andrew get told by the nicest character we've seen so far they should rot in hell, and also have him turning to drinks to numb the pain. Ashley then essays him. Well, totally blacked out on booze, and this moment is not treated with almost any gravity. The characters quickly spring up and game end. The whole time, this super upbeat music is playing too. Andrew beating up Ashley is treated seriously. I know this game is capable of doing so what happened? Why is this not taken seriously? Well, I don't think it's a surprise that the most popular character in the game gets a million outs in this new chapter. If she's actually as one-sidedly evil as she was in chapter 1 and 2, maybe she won't be as liked by the audience for this game. And also, if he wants to avoid this ending while not giving into the weird incest shit, too bad. The only way to avoid this is if you find a wedding ring, and then Andrew does the eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and chooses to get married and have children with Ashley. I'm glad I could avoid the characters doing incest so that they could do fucking super incest. Jesus. Half the time, it feels like this chapter was made perfectly to annoy me. More weird incest stuff that I can't avoid, doing the shocking thing for the sake of it, and then not even taking it seriously. The retroactive story corrections, everything about this game, aside from the visuals, is worse. And I just cannot, for the life of me, even say it's worth talking about at this point. The first video on this game was motivated entirely by my own and very personal interest. It wasn't made to smear the game or spread misinformation. I just wanted to play a video game and then write about my experience. It just happens that 500,000 people saw the video. Wait, 500,000 people? Holy shit! I will acknowledge that me talking about my interpretations of things is seen by a lot of people, and that is scary. I have no doubt in my heart that something I say will cause at least someone to not like the game for the reasons I laid out. But like, what am I supposed to do about that? I made it clear in every video that this is how I think about something. Not that my thesis is somehow the objectively correct way to interpret that piece of media. If someone decides that my opinion is one they agree with, I cannot do anything about that. The only thing I can say is, welcome to living on planet Earth. I am just some dude talking about a thing I was interested in. That is all there is to me. The Coffin of Andy and Leyley is no longer interesting because every chapter will be more of the same issues I had with it. I'll come back every year to say the same thing. I'm sure that works for some people, probably most people. but not for me. I make these videos because they're fun. If you do the same thing over and over and over again, then it will stop being fun. So unless something absolutely insane happens with this game, or it actually stops getting updates, I'm done. I'm sorry to the hopefully tiny part of my audience that is really interested in hearing me talk about incest. It's probably like 2 people, I'm just exaggerating. That's the end of the video. If you managed to sit through this half-an-hour yap session, you should comment something like, Ty, why did you buy a monster truck for a video? We did war crimes last time, so let's convince people I do things like drive. God, I'm a fucking loser. Before the video ends, I want to give a quick thank you to my $5 and up Patreon members. I recently did a lot of revamping there. We're moving to Patreon-only stuff. I'm also going to be posting my first actual exclusive video on JoJo's, if you care about that. Chromatic Aberrant, Nakocho Official, Much Appreciated, Obscuroni, and Pofanatic, or Israfel. You guys really don't know how much this means to me, that you want to give me your money every month so I can do tax evasion. You guys are awesome. I should be streaming next week after this video comes out as well. It's FNAF. You know how this goes. I'm about to get jump scared. Anyhow, that's all my announcements out of the way. I hope all of you have a wonderful day, despite you probably being at school while watching this. Have a wonderful, wonderful school day. I'm laughing. See you, lads.